Hello there. I just wanted to say a big thank you, first of all, to Tony Newton for asking me to be a part of this, to try and to contribute something to this Ask the Filmmaker um, web series that he's doing. I'm not the best person in front of the camera, as you're going to find out over the next sort of 20 minutes or so, but hopefully I can provide some sort of insights to anybody who's starting out or who's doing film stuff. And yeah, so how did I get started in filmmaking? It's I don't actually know. I can't remember like what. Thinking back, I think growing up I was always a very kind of creative person. I used to sort of enjoy making things a lot as a child. I used to enjoy sort of building things out of boxes and just sort of making things. I remember making like Tracy Island, Blue Peter, and things like that. And I always like to kind of create things. And thinking back, I think I remember it must have been around sort of '93, so I must have been about 9 years old. I remember going around my grandparents' house, and my granddad had just brought a Hi8 video camera, and he was kind of showing some sort of home movies of the cats and stuff that he'd filmed. And I remember thinking at the time, I'd really like to borrow that and go out and recreate Jurassic Park in like my garden with my plastic dinosaurs. And so, the idea of wanting to make films must have been around that sort of age. I also remember there was like a charity shop nearby where I lived, and they had like a Super 8 camera in there. I think it's about £15 or something. So I sort of saved up for ages to buy this camera, because I thought if I can buy this camera, I can go and make some little films. And I didn't really sort of think about the fact that you'd have to buy the Super 8 film and then get it processed, and that there was actually a lot more kind of work involved to actually use this camera to kind of shoot films on. But I remember saving up and buying the camera and taking it home and being like really excited that I actually had a camera, even though I didn't actually make anything on it because I couldn't afford the film stock and stuff. And then I was at school. I remember around this sort of time on like Channel 3, they used to have these sort of behind the movies featurettes. So they'd have like I think it's sort of the afternoon sort of time. I used to sort of like tune in, and they'd have like ones about sort of the making of Demolition Man and sort of other films. And I think they had like ones about the James Bond films and stuff like that. And I sort of got really interested in sort of the behind the scenes stuff of films, and I kind of wanted to get into sort of special effects and things like that. So I was still sort of about 9 or 10 years old at this sort of age, but that sort of kind of sort of making stuff kind of creative sort of side sort of interested me. And then I was at school and I had a friend called Jamie Shearing, and he sort of joined quite late in the school year. I think it's sort of year 9 or year 10, and he was kind of really into filmmaking or into films, and I used to kind of go around his house after school, and we used to watch kind of video nasties. It was with him that we found this guy through Diamond Free Ads, which is like a local kind of classified newspaper where you could buy and sell things. And there was a guy in there who was selling copies of The Exorcist. This is at the time when it's still banned. And I used to go around and he had loads of other things as well in his catalogue. He had loads of like these films which are still banned, and I'd go around his house after school and we'd watch all these things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Natural Born Killers and Last House on the Left, and so and it's like trying to pinpoint the kind of time the sort of moment when I got into horror. I remember during the 1990s there was a series on BBC Two called Clive Barker's A to Z of Horror, and I remember watching that, and had like clips from Night of the Living Dead. I remember seeing these kind of grainy black and white clips and sort of thinking, you know what? Because the clips they showed were like sort of like actors like zombies and stuff in like a graveyard, so like the opening of the film, and And I remember thinking, you know what, I live near a graveyard. If I get a camera and some actors, I can go and sort of make a film like this. So it kind of like seemed, it's always something that I kind of wanted to do. Like I said, I can't remember the exact moment in my life when I actually wanted to make horror films. I was always interested in horror and kind of wanting to make stuff. And then in sort of 2000, I left school and I went to college. I went to Brockenhurst, and I studied film studies and media, and that was like heaven, really, because you'd either be doing film studies, so I'll be studying films and watching films and learning about films, or I'll be doing like media, so we'll be going out to cameras and we're going out filming stuff. And this was like the first kind of year we didn't have any sort of like offline editing software. We had like sort of tape to tape stuff, so we went out with these cameras which are like JVC, and they shot on VHS, and then to edit them you'd have to like put them into like these machines where you'd have to copy from like one machine to the other machine. And then it was only in their second year I think they finally got Adobe Premiere version 2 or something, so that was the first kind of experience of like using computer based software. I remember we really annoyed the tech guy at the time, because we used to go out and like we'd have like an assignment where we'd go out and have to like film like a couple of minute kind of like short like little commercial or something, and we'd go off and like make a 20-minute like short film or something, and then we'd come back and we'd fill up all the computer hard drive space of like with all our like film we were making, some sort of like epic little film, and we'd then like make like a behind the scenes feature as well and stuff, and we'd use up all the hard drive space. And like, I remember one time he actually came along and deleted all our work off there, and we were really like pissed off at him. And then so after college I sort of became interested in music, and so I ended up doing like a degree in music at Bournemouth. And then the kind of last year I was able to do like a degree to kind of finish off the sort of final part was music design, which is kind of film music. So I sort of went off and got kind of interested in music for a few years, and then doing that kind of final year, this must be sort of 2007, that I sort of realised, actually, do you know what, I really like films and filmmaking. And so in that kind of last year I'd sit in the library and I'd read all these kind of books, because my girlfriend was doing costume design at the Arts Institute, and so she had access to like the library, and had all these like amazing books all about like the kind of the guerrilla filmmakers handbook, and all these kind of like, you know, these books about kind of horror films and stuff, and I sort of spent the sort of last part of my time at university reading all these books, and I kind of had it in my head that I really wanted to go and make a film. So as soon as I finished, I decided I was going to try and make a feature film, and around that sort of time I was working in Tesco, and I used to kind of read the local newspapers. There's the Forest Journal and the Bournemouth Echo, and in one of those there was an article about a local filmmaker called Christian James, and he just made a film called Freak Out, which I've actually put down here. Ooh. So he made this film for like, I think about 30,000 or something, but he shot it all in film, and he went to Cannes Film Festival and got it released through Anchor Bay. And I remember reading that and thinking, you know, that's really impressive, you know, he's gone and done that, and that's the sort of thing I want to do. And then shortly after then I read about this other film called Small Town Folk, which is made by a guy called Peter Stanley Ward. Stars Chris R. Wright and a few other people, Dan Palmer. They're in this, and this was all shot on a Canon XL1. I think they had a Canon XL1 for half of it, and then the other half they used a Canon XL2 because the XL1 broke or something. But this is like the kind of first sort of film that I read about and learned that was shot kind of digitally. So this was shot on like mini DV. And around that time I was living with a friend of mine, and our next door neighbour, a guy called Rick, worked for the BBC, and I sort of mentioned to him that I was, you know, wanted to sort of try and make a film. and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've got access to cameras like Sony Z1s and the Sony FX1 and stuff like that. So if you want to borrow those, I can bring those down at the weekend, and you can use that and go out and shoot and stuff." So I started borrowing these cameras off him, but it became a sort of pain after a while. You always have to rely upon him to kind of bring these cameras back. So I sort of looked at trying to buy a camera, and the camera I really wanted was the Canon X01, because I'd heard obviously Small Town Folk was shot on that, and also Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later was shot on the Canon X01, but they weren't making it anymore. And I knew if I needed to buy a camera, I had to buy it through finance. So I found a company called Pixmania, and there was a camera on there called the Sony HVR 1000E or something for like 800 quid, but it was like £35 a month over 4 years. So I bought that camera and then immediately sold it on eBay and got 650 quid or something for it, which I got £800 for it. And I used £650 to buy a Canon XL1 and £150 to buy a Rode NTG2 microphone. And so I had I had a camera and had a microphone, and I brought a Tascam DAT recorder to do sound. And then I went to PC World and brought a computer on finance, and then got a bootleg version of Adobe's Master Collection CS4. And so with these sort of things, with the camera, the Tascam recorder, the Rode NTG2, and my computer from PC World with a bootleg version of Adobe CS4, I set about making Season of the Witch, which was my first feature film. And the idea was kind of like to do like a kind of cross between The Wicker Man and Straw Dogs, and it took probably about 5 years or so to finally make it. And I used like a local group of actors from a theatre company called the Victoria Players, and I also advertised on like places like Star Now and Talent Circle for actors, and managed to get a actress called Beth Kingston, and she, halfway through filming, she ended up getting a part in Hollyoaks, which was like quite a big sort of bonus for the film, the fact that she was in Hollyoaks and she was in my film. And after sort of 5 years or so, that film finally got finished, and I was looking around. I can't remember how I found the company. I think I was looking around on Facebook for like distribution companies, and I found there was a page for a company, and they said they were looking for films that are ready to be released. And so I got in contact with the people on there, and I spoke to a woman called Pam Vlasters, I think her name was, or someone else, and she said she was interested in releasing the film, and she watched it and she liked it. And then about a year or so passed, and then I got another email from someone else from another company, and they were somehow involved. And then he was like, "Oh, sorry it's taken so long, but we're going to put the film out now." And eventually, after it must have been about 2 or 3 years from when I first contacted them, that the film finally came out on DVD, and also came out on like video on demand and stuff. But because this took so long to finally come out, during the time that it took from me first contacting the company to the moment that it came out, that I written and was starting another film called Any Minute Now, and I'll get the DVD for that. So for this film, I tried raising some money, and I had a good producer called Daniel Coffey, who now lives in Australia, but he also worked on Season of the Witch as well. I met him through the Victoria Players, and with him we sort of went round all kind of like local businesses and stuff, and we went on the local radio and we were asking people if they wanted to invest money in the film, and we raised probably sort of £4,000 or £5,000, which we then used for things like hiring cameras. I moved up to the Sony EX3, which was like quite a good camera at the time, and we used I was able to get a guy called John Fry, who was like a local DP, and Steadicam operator, and he came down and did some great like kind of Steadicam stuff in the snow, and we ran rehearsals, casting at Salisbury Art Centre, and I ran ads again in like kind of the local sort of websites and things like that, and got Valerie Calvi. She came down and she was in Braveheart. She played the young Murian, I think. And also Lee McDonald came on board. I found him through a guy called Tim Faraday, who was a local actor who's been in like lots of great films. He's a really, really nice guy, and he made a short film called The Healing Game, which I helped out on, and he kind of put me in touch with Lee McDonald, because Lee McDonald was in The Healing Game, and so Lee McDonald and Valerie came down, and we spent, I think, about 2 or 3 years making this film. And again, when it was finished, I went to Cannes Film Festival. This must have been sort of 2012. So I went over with Daniel Coffey. We thought we might be able to try and find like a good distribution deal for it. And we found it really hard to try and find like a buyer for it. In the end, we went with a company called Continuum Motion Pictures, who are based in California, I think. And they put it out on like DVD and like did put it on iTunes and stuff like that. But a lot of the companies that we're speaking to when we went to Cannes Film Festival were saying that kind of like a low budget horror films, stuff like kind of ghost films, don't really sell that well unless you've got like a kind of big name like Nicole Kidman or whatever, like in the others. So they kind of said, you know, if you do like a kind of grindhouse, kind of like gory kind of slasher film, that would be a much better sell than like a ghost film. So I was in the hotel in Cannes with Daniel Coffey, and I said, look, for the next film, let's just go and do like a straight up kind of like real kind of genre, sort of like kind of gory slasher type film. And that's where the idea for Harvest of the Dead came from, which is a shame really, because I really like Any Minute Now. I think it's probably the best thing I've ever actually made. I put a lot of effort into it, and it's kind of like, but it was just a hard sell, I think. So I then came back, and at this point I kind of moved over to DSLR cameras. So I brought a 550D, and halfway through the film I ended up getting a 5D Mark II, which was kind of like the sort of flagship kind of camera for DSLRs at the time. And went about making Harvest of the Dead. And the idea was kind of to make like a straightforward kind of slasher film, but then try and do something a bit more interesting with it. So make it kind of like, it starts out like a typical kind of slasher film, and then it kind of goes off in these kind of different directions, and it kind of ends up not where you think it's going to be, sort of thing. And when the film was finished, I contacted, there's 2 companies I was kind of interested in. One was SRS Cinema, and the other one was Worldwide Multimedia. And Worldwide Multimedia agreed to take on sort of worldwide rights, and they were going to put the DVD out, and they also put it out on like video on demand and things like that. But SRS Cinema, they put out like a limited edition Blu-ray release first of all, so it came out on Blu-ray. I think we had to sort of work out a kind of contract between the 2 companies whereby SRS would have the kind of rights for the first 2 or 3 months, and they would be able to have like kind of exclusive rights for the DVD, for the Blu-ray, and also they did like a VHS, which is, I think it's really cool. I mean, the VHS itself is like a green VHS, and so the first sort of kind of 3 months they could only sell this through their site, so they put these out through their site, and then after 3 months it then kind of went worldwide on Amazon and places like that on the DVD and video on demand. And then since then, myself and a guy called Terence Elliott, who I've known for years. I've known Terence for about 10 years now, going back to sort of my time working with him at Tesco. And yes, he came on board on the first film. He did a very small role, and then he came back for Any Minute Now. He did like another small role, bit of acting, and then with Harvest of the Dead, he kind of got really involved with like the writing and stuff, and he's one of those people that I love working with because he's just passionate about filmmaking. He's just passionate about films. He loves kind of horror films, and I think that's one of the sort of key points really. If you want to get into filmmaking, you should do it for the right reasons. You should do it because you're passionate about films. You know, I've sort of met a lot of people over the years who seem to sort of want to get into filmmaking not because they're interested in films, but because it's kind of like an ego thing for them. That it's about, they kind of like the kind of glamour and stuff behind being a director or something, and that kind of then leads to these sort of people that are kind of very competitive. And there's, you know, trying to make a film is hard enough as it is, and when you kind of come across these sort of people that, you know, it's not about the film itself, it's about, or about the idea of making films. It's about kind of stoking their own ego and wanting to kind of feel important because they are the director or whatever, or they are the kind of, you know, producer. But Terence is one of those people. He's not like that at all, and he loves films, and we'll often kind of like come up with ideas. And at the moment we're trying to work on like a new film idea. But although we're actually in the process of finishing up this film, which is the sequel to Harvest of the Dead. This is Harvest of the Dead 2, Halloween Night. We sort of spent a couple of years shooting this, and it's kind of all finished, but we came up with this other idea for like another scene just because it runs a little bit too short, and we were kind of on the verge of going out and shooting that. But obviously with the whole coronavirus thing, which has kind of kicked off now, it's kind of put a bit of a dampener on that. So yeah, so I mean, advice for filmmakers. For if you're someone, like I said, first of all, if you want to get into filmmaking, you should do it because you're passionate about filmmaking. There are people like I said, Tony Newton, Sam Mason Bell, Nathan Head. There's always people who I know through Facebook and stuff like that who do make films because they're just passionate about the whole process of making films. Like myself and Terence, we just love the whole idea of when you come up with an idea and then you write a script, and then you go out there and you shoot these scenes and come back and you start editing it all together, and the whole kind of creative process. That's what we love, and all the other kind of like nonsense which goes with it, which you kind of encounter with other people. There's people that kind of like, I don't know, people that kind of aren't interested in that aren't really interested in films. They just sort of do it because, you know, it's like I said, it's an ego thing for them. But that's kind of, I think that's why I've carried on doing it for so long. You know, I'll have these kind of like moments where you get a little bit depressed sometimes when you kind of feel like your career is not kind of going as well as it could be, or you kind of feel like, you know, by this sort of stage you should be getting money now. We should be getting, you know, like a good producer who can raise funds and stuff, and you can go and make a film properly. And then after a while you sort of think, oh, actually I just want to go out and make something, and I want to go out and make another film. And then I think we're at a stage now in kind of like filmmaking history where anybody can go and make a film. Like the equipment and the resources is there. It's like, you know, I'm shooting this at the moment on a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K, which is just an incredible camera, and you can buy this for about £1,200, and that comes with a free license for a copy of DaVinci Resolve Studio, which is like the software which I use to edit on and color grade on. So you can get a camera and like the full editing software for like, you know, £1,200, £1,300. If you can also go back and get this is like the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. This only shoots HD, but it shoots HD RAW. And this is still like a brilliant camera. It still shoots 12-bit raw, uncompressed, 12-bit, DNG files, which you can then take into your editing software and color grade and do all sorts of. So I think there's no excuse not to go out and make films, and if I think, like I said, do it for the right reasons. Don't go out and think that you're going to go and have a career as a filmmaker. Don't think you're going to go and make a living as a filmmaker. Just go and do it because you want to go and do it, and enjoy doing it. Enjoy the whole process. Enjoy the whole learning process as well. I love kind of learning about new things to do with the software, or to do with, if I read books and stuff about filmmakers, and I learn about kind of the history of film, all that sort of stuff I do because I just love learning about it, and I just enjoy it. So anything I've got coming up? So I've got a new film I'm in the process of writing with. I'm trying to get this one. Like I said, I'm trying to get this one finished at the moment. There's still this one more scene, maybe another scene, which we're going to shoot once all this whole coronavirus thing goes away, and after that, myself and Terence are kind of working on a new script. I had another film, which is kind of written, and I was trying to raise finance for. I had a producer working on it for the past kind of sort of 2 years or so, but it doesn't really seem to be going anywhere. I mean, I had the idea of making like a short film first of all, going down the David F. Sandberg route, and the guy who did Lights Out. He made the short film Lights Out, and that kind of went viral and stuff like that. So I kind of had the idea of doing that with it, but the producer had other ideas and kind of felt that we could raise the money for the script, for the whole film, just based upon the script and stuff, and it's kind of not really got anywhere. So I think after we finish this film, myself and Terence will go out and start work on the next one. And it's one of those things. It's if I ever get to a stage where I can actually make money or live from filmmaking, then that would be amazing. But if that never happens, if I never make a single penny from filmmaking, I'll still keep making films, because I just love the whole process. I love the fact that even if nobody watches them, the fact that we've made something and they're kind of out there, that's kind of what makes it all worthwhile. So I hope this has been of some interest to someone, but yeah, thanks for watching, and speak soon.